Welcome to the DC Beer Show, everybody. We are at DC Beer across all social media. As our dear friends, editors, and writers, Jake and Stein, are out for the evening, I'll be stepping up as your host with the most as we kick off this stormy month of August. Joining me on this Friday, the 11th, is our lover of all things juicy, Jordan, as well as two extra special guests, our publisher, Papa Beer Richard, and genuine all-around great guy and other half GM, Matt Splain. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
Richard, with what beer are you imbibing tonight?
I have actually had several beers earlier, full counts from our good friends at DC Brow. I was fortunate enough to attend their Jerry Garcia party last weekend, I guess it was. It was fan-freaking-tastic. It was great to see Brandon Skull, see a lot of great music there. I picked up a bunch of beer, and me and my friend Adam, who, if you've been listening to this show forever, you will remember as my original co-host
Brew Daddies
on this podcast. We drank a bunch of full count lager from DC Brow. And so I'm currently finishing up my night with a little Cotton and Reed dark rum and ginger
that sounds
beer.
enticing. Maybe we have to do that as well.
Taste it. Jordan, what about you? What is in your glass tonight?
I want to do a special shout out to our good friend Gregory up in Vermont. He shared with me a Freak Folk beer, IPA Poser. It's one of their exploratory fruited IPA series, hopped with El Dorado, Simcoe, and Mosaic, conditioned on pineapple puree and lime zest. So very tropical on this August night. So yeah, enjoying that IPA, keeping it with the juice theme, and
Hi, Greg.
just happy to be with you guys. Splain, good sir, what are you having?
Well, I'm drinking another half beer, surprise, surprise. I'm drinking our last can of the Ivy City Czech style lager. One of my personal favorites from work with Styrian Golding hops. Delicious, 4.6%, and just easy drinking. What about you, Brandy? What are you drinking tonight?
I do agree with you. That beer is pretty fire, actually. I am drinking another Dynasty beer, kind of like last episode, Rules of Civility #2. It's a spiced wheat ale, and honestly, I'm kind of sad I just have one can of this because I am almost done and I need another thing from the refrigerator. So shout out to Dynasty and shout out to all of our lovely beer that we're all drinking from all over. Jordan, I want to jump in to some cool events going on because I know there are too many to name. So let's get going.
Most certainly, there's always something to do, especially in the district and especially in the summertime. I see Silver Branch had a job fair yesterday, and they're having one again today, Friday, 1 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Warrenton location. They seem to be moving along pretty quickly with their expansion, so I'm looking forward to that. I know there have been quite a few other breweries in Warrenton, but I haven't been to any of them yet. But hey, Brandy, that sounds like a road trip. We might have
Jordan
to
and
sprinkle it
Brandy
up
on
because
location.
it has been it has been so long. But the closest I've been was the old Bushead. So it's fairly close to Warrenton, and pretty good beers, traditional styles. But I'm curious about the other breweries and how they stack up against Silver Branch's Belgians and their English styles as well. So yeah, we'll definitely have to do a visit out their way. Richard, I know you love Silver Branch, and I know you're going to miss Silver Branch because it's always been super convenient for you and myself. Also know you're a Silver Branch member. Will you keep your beer club status? I know you'll miss it. If you'd like to transfer that over to me, I
That's
can hold it down for
true.
you in your stead. But just let me
that's
know.
didn't think about that.
I have to be honest. My membership at Silver Branch has expired. I allowed it to do so knowing that I was leaving town. I mean, Brett and Christian. Brett used to be Brett Robeson, who is the co-owner at Silver Branch. Used to be general manager at
Republic,
place called Republic,
which is now Motorcat, which is now Richard's new place to go.
Republic in Tacoma Park, and that's where I first met Christian and got to know them. And Adam, who I mentioned earlier, Adam and I interviewed them when they first got the location of Silver Branch on this original version of this podcast. And then we interviewed them when they built out the brewery. And then we interviewed them again on this show not long before they opened. So they were regulars on the show. I love their beers and I love having them in the neighborhood. And I'm really psyched about the growth that they've been having. I will miss their beers very much. And I'm sorry, Jordan, I can't transfer any membership to you. But I promise you, there's a brewery in the town I'll be living in called Blackberry Farm. You can get their beers, in a lot of the NRG locations. Pretty good stuff. And so I got a new local brewery that does some really cool stuff that I'm looking forward to, and I will ship you all some beers.
There we go. There we go. So I'll definitely be looking forward to that. Always nice to get a taste of Tennessee or just a taste of the South. But and sticking with just some of the breweries and beers in the district, Blue Jacket, they have a couple new beers coming out. The Winchester, for those that aren't hopheads, that like your traditional styles. This is an Anglo style pub ale with East Kent Golding hops, especially if you like all the specifics. I'm sure Stein would appreciate that. It comes in at 4.5% and an infinite playlist. That'll be the beer I'm actually looking forward to. That is a TIPA or a triple IPA with Nectaron and Citra hops coming in at a whopping 10%. Both of these will be excellent beers, and I'm really excited for the can art, especially for
It's
the
so
infinite
cool.
playlist. Richard, you'd mentioned something about NRG.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Anything else you want to
Yeah,
share about NRG?
Snallygaster, October this year. So the VIP tickets are gone for Snally. Sold out fast as usual. There's still plenty of general admission tickets though. So if you're interested in getting into Snally, get those tickets now. NRG has done a super cool thing, and they are offering the Women's Brew Culture Club a buy 3 get 1 free deal on general admission tickets to Snallygaster. So I know Brandy would love to roll up with like a full posse of all the ladies into Snallygaster. So if you're interested, reach out to DT Beer, reach out to Brandy, and we'll get you the discount code.
Awesome.
What breweries are we looking forward to at Snally, everybody?
Other
Other half.
Yes, the Haze Craze. I'm looking forward to it.
So actually last year was very fun, in my opinion, at Snally because there seemed to be more diversity in the beer offerings because in the past years, because I feel like I've always gone to Snally, back even when it was at Union Market, it like there's it reflected the times of what everyone's drinking, so I'm sure Jordan went to Snally and was in heaven because it was literally IPA after IPA after IPA. But last year was so fun with, like more smoked beers and just seeing new breweries open, like they're like women owned breweries. And I think I'm just looking forward to seeing the diversity of the beer, not necessarily like the breweries per se. And I'm hoping that all of our local breweries will be represented at Snally this year, as they usually are. So I don't know. What about you, Jordan or Matt?
I'd say, yeah, it'll be nice to have some of the breweries that aren't local to DC. That's honestly what I look forward to for Snallygaster. I would agree. It's not that much fun, even when it's over 100 hazy IPAs. I mean, this is coming from Mr. Hazy himself. But I hope they don't swing the pendulum too far the opposite direction because I don't want
Oh,
100 smoothie sours or 100 barrel
no.
aged stouts. Like, let's find somewhere some balance. So I'm looking forward to like the balance, but also like a lot of the breweries along the East Coast being represented. But outside of other half, what are you looking forward to, Matt?
Honestly, I want some Human Robot. I love their lagers. Whenever I can get my hands on them, those guys are great whenever they come down into town. So I'm super excited to see those guys. I drink too many IPAs, so whenever I can get a well-crafted, amazing lager, I want my hands on that.
I want to see some smoke beers because it's that time of the year. I don't think we mentioned, but Silver Branch has already released their Oktoberfest. They're doing their rye IPA, their wit and triple. So like so many local breweries are cranking out their Oktoberfest kind of beers, which I know Mike Stein and myself we all love. So I don't know. I want to see some North Carolina breweries, represent my home state.
Yeah, it would be cool if like Burial was there. I do like Resident Culture. They make some
Oh,
really good beer as well.
oh
So
yeah.
those are two I'm
Hey,
looking forward
Papa
to.
Beer, will you be back for Snelly?
I don't know. That remains to be seen. I would love to be back to Snally, but I also want to explore a bunch of new breweries in Western North Carolina and Eastern Tennessee. And I'm really excited because in a couple of weeks, we have tickets to go to our first beer festival down there.
What?
In just a couple weeks. I'm so excited. A craft beer festival in the stadium of the local minor league team, the Tennessee Smokies. Um, and one of my favorite things, and one of the reasons we decided to do this right away, is there. The advertisement said, "Please bring
Oh,
your dogs."
Awesome.
Of course, we
speaking of beer
can.
friends, my friend Emma, formerly of Astrolab, has just opened a wine and beer shop in Potomac, Maryland called Whelan's Beer and Wine. Like literally just last week it opened. I was texting with Emma about it, and she is so over the top excited. Like I'm so happy for her. I also got a little sneak peek picture that she texted me. And let me tell you, it is gorgeous. So head up to Potomac Village to support her new bottle shop. We'll definitely get her on the podcast very soon. And we'll take a trip up there. Matt Splain here has actually run a bottle shop before. He was actually there for quite some time. Matt, how's it like to run a bottle shop?
It's a lot of fun and it's a lot of stress. I managed Gillies. I was a part of Gillies for 9.5 years, managed it for probably 7. And it's a blast, meeting with all the different beer and wine reps and trying all the, new, fresh, cool beers before it hits the shelves is the exciting side of things. But the rewarding side was, you know, picking the right product to put on the shelf and then seeing customers come in and get excited when the a beer that they like or a style that they like is back in stock, and then them coming back and be like, oh my god, that beer was amazing, can you get more of it? And sometimes you got to break their heart and be like, no, it was a one-off. But other times when I can, I would order them a case or more depending on what it was. But it was always a lot of fun. And Gillies in particular is a very unique package store in that it was a bar, deli, and store. So we had a really cool clientele, and a lot of bars call themselves the Cheers of their neighborhood. I will say Gillies in the Twin Brook neighborhood of Rockville is truly the Cheers of that area. You walk in, everyone knows your name. All the customers there are close friends and go to each other's weddings and Christmases. And you know, it was a lot of fun, being a part of that atmosphere. And it's something that, I've tried to instill in my new team at Other Half, and in the same atmosphere at Other Half. It's a little different at a brewery, particularly at a large production facility, but it's something I look back on fondly and I really enjoyed. And, one thing I always got excited about was when a new brewery came in and trying their beers and figuring out where they would fit. And, with the industry going the way it is, there's unfortunately some breweries closed, but there's always another one to step in. And, right now we've got a great brewery in Urban Garden. And I think, Brandy, you got some, news on Urban Garden Brewing coming up.
Yeah, Urban Garden is crushing it. I headed over to the Peachy Keen release, which is the collaboration with Red Bear, and I talked to Imani. She's so excited. I don't know exactly where this is going to be, but Urban Garden is looking to open a brick and mortar in my part of DC, Fort Totten. I don't know much more about it, but I'm so excited. So I'll have Hellbender and Urban Garden Brewing. So happy for Imani and Lindsay. I'm sure our Women's Brew Culture Club will learn more about this progress on the 19th for our August event. You should come to it. So if you are interested in joining the Women's Brew Culture Club, we're just like a cool club. We go to these local breweries, especially women-owned breweries, and learn the process, meet and greet with the women, and just be inspired, and have beer knowledge, which is so important because the beer industry is such a male dominated field that we need to show up. And so if you're listening to this and you know a female who is into beer, send them my way. Brandy at DC Beer, or go to Twitter, Insta, or whatever. And hopefully you can make it to the next event. Matt, you have some pretty like big beer news. I mean, is it big beer news? But it's beer news for sure.
Pretty big, pretty big. Announced this week, Tuesday. Anheuser-Busch has sold 8 of their beer beverage brands to pot company Tilray. Tilray has now become the 5th largest craft beer player in the US by acquiring from InBev, Shock Top, Breckenridge Brewery, Blue Point Brewing Company, Ten Barrel Brewing Company, Red Hook Brewery, Widmer Brothers Brewing, Square Mile Cidery Company, and Highball Energy for a mere $85 million. I believe it was 85. Compared to what InBev paid collectively for all these breweries, Tilray got a steal, in my opinion. And some of these beers are just going to get better now because, when you mix a pot company with beer, what can go wrong?
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
but I think it makes sense. I mean, I think you're right. The idea of giving craft beer over to people who like doing craft things, as opposed to um, the kinds of companies who are really after scale.
yeah.
Like, like InBev is a scale company. Like,
Yeah.
and they just never couldn't really manage the opportunities that those brands had.
Well, and one of the articles I was reading today, and hopefully I remember this correctly, so I apologize in advance. Tilray and a lot of these big pot companies, you know, while the marijuana industry is thriving and exploding, there's not a big players, and so it's hard for the shelf space and hard, to really compete. And so to expand into the craft beer industry, they're not just fighting for shelf space, in the dispensaries, but they can, spread the money out and, maintain some of these brands that are already making a lot of money and siphon that money over to the pot side and, really help, increase the business over there. So, we'll see how it goes. A couple of those brands, Shock Top, and this is not a pun, was the most shocking one to sell because it seems like they've been part of InBev for
Yeah.
so long, and to be let go for InBev to let them go like this. I'm excited to see Red Hook and Widmer Brothers leave InBev because I've always been a big fan of them, and when they joined them, beers were fine, but I hope to see some expansion and some evolution in their beers again.
Yeah, so it was interesting, like just to kind of see that crossover. I think like Constellation, they went the opposite way a couple of years ago. They owned a whole bunch of beverage companies, and they bought some pot companies, Canopy Growth, and now to see it go the other way is interesting. So strange times we're in, but good times. I mean, I can foresee a lot of experimentation on the beer side coming up over the next few years. So excited for that.
Absolutely.
Speaking of experimentation in beer, our guest tonight, I think, is doing some really, really interesting things. Kind of wish Stein were here and Jake were here because we're going to learn a lot.
This week's guest has been brewing professionally for the past 12 years at places such as Lost Rhino and Sonoma's Bears Republic. This past May, he opened Mieza Blendery in Alexandria, Virginia. Please welcome Alex Lynch to the DC Beer Show. Hi, Alex. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, Brandy, how are you?
Not too bad. Alex, we have a lot to cover in a short amount of time, so let's just jump in. Could you tell our listeners who may have not heard about your new brewery, tell us about Mieza? Like, how did it all start? What is a blendery?
Yeah, so a blendery is, I mean, it could have happened, been done for hundreds of years now, but it's kind of a rare concept in the United States at the moment. And the idea is essentially you're brewing off site and then you're doing all the fermentation on site. So it's a little bit of a different operational approach as well as a different creative approach. I really got into it, so I got into craft brewing pretty much after college, and but I was also home brewing at the same time, and I was in DC basements that had no temperature control. So I was like, why would I try to make an IPA that just I know why it's not going to taste good because it fermented like 80 Fahrenheit. So I was playing around with saisons, and they were coming out really well, and I kept on going down that rabbit hole. And as I, kind of learned how to brew and cellar and all these like different operation or aspects of brewing in a professional brewery, it just kept clicking that like my nightly concerns at home were just very different than the day to day concerns of making a good IPA or a good Pilsner or something like that. So, the seed was planted a long time ago, and sort of the more I progressed, the more I wanted to really dedicate a company that could do mixed culture sort of sour beer and saisons really well. So that's where it's a different operational approach. So you have as opposed to a brew house, all your money is just kind of sitting in inventory and beer aging. But also operationally, you can kind of build the whole floor plan differently, so you can kind of execute these beers really well. And then creatively, it's sort of a different approach, or I'm trying to make it or really focus on it being a different approach where, your average beer that a craft brewer is making kind of goes through an assembly line process, where Pilsner is a different recipe, fermented at a different temperature with a different yeast, but it's really treated as a singular unit. And blending is usually only done for consistency or doing a double bottling run. And what I'm hoping to focus on and each beer, I'm trying to make sure I'm sort of executing this is like when I brew, when I ferment, there's beer components that are then blended together to make something that couldn't have really been made as a singular batch. And so there's a lot of little ways you can do that, but that's sort of the checklist test if I'm making a certain beer as a concept is like, could you have made this as a singular batch? And the answer for some of these is like maybe, but continually I'm hoping to strive to kind of have everything be something that couldn't have been a single brew, a single ferment, and a single bottling.
I think it's really neat that, um, you know, eh, all of the interviews that we do and all of the people that we personally know in the beer industry and brewers or even brewery owners, they always start it as homebrew. And so, that's usually the first question that I ask. So, how did you get into it? I already assumed it was home brewing because that's always the answer. But when these people open their breweries, they focus on a traditional brewery style. So, I think a few places do list themselves or call themselves a brewery slash blendery, but yours, you just went straight into the blendery. I think that's really cool because it kind of sets you apart. And I really appreciate that. And it made me even more intrigued to come visit you and have you on the show. I think it's really interesting and wonderful that you've been creating beers with Dynasty. How long had you been working with Dynasty, and how was that relationship morphed? How has it morphed after opening your blendery?
Yeah, so Fabio Garcia is the head brewer at Dynasty. He was my first boss at Lost Rhino. Very great guy. I think super generous with everyone in the community. It's always he's always said he was talking to someone or helping out here or consulting there. And he's, certainly helped me along my path. So a little bit when I was trying to get started out, I wanted to build some barrel stock and, Fabio and the other partners of Dynasty were very generous and sort of, renting me some space so I could build up beer that would then be essentially contract brewed because it was fermented there. But at least I could test out, recipes and stuff and um, you know, I think Fabio didn't want to put a lot of like effort into building a whole sour program or something like that. So that was working well. The pandemic was I think weird for everyone. For me, it was just yeah. I don't know. I don't say 2020 is my year, but that's where I thought getting a location, and that turned out not to be the case. You're very much a purgatory and odyssey kind of combined in the worst ways. Um, so yeah, I think I think we're both really busy. So I think we're trying to figure out where it's going to go. I'm brewing about a year's worth of beer in the next 2 months. It's the middle of fruiting season. So, I haven't seen Fabi in a little while.
Yeah, we just had him
So we'll
on.
see where it goes.
Yeah,
But
we just had him on. Hi,
yeah.
Fabio. So it's really, but your beers specifically, like your blended beers, they have been featured at Dynasty, right? So the folks
Yeah.
who may not have heard of you per se or like heard of your new place, they've probably had your stuff at Dynasty. So that is a testament and they need to come and check you out. So that's really cool. If you already had like a base before you opened your blendery. So I love that for you.
If it existed or not, yeah, hopefully it was great, but
Yeah.
it's unclear.
Well, I mean, you came this far, so it's, and I can personally say, because I just visited, that it was really good. I tend to not drink too many sours, but I appreciate sours, and the type of sours that I like are the sours that you make. So, I have a question for our editor in chief, Mr. Jake. He wants to know about the economics of wort trucking. It's a very specific question.
That's a great question. I'm trying to figure that out. Honestly, I'm not running the math. I think there's also the environmental aspect that I'm curious about too, because I don't understand, like, in building out what is a pretty simple location, it's like a trench drain. The floor was already tiled. It was amazing to me how complex, or at least stalled out, building a brewery location is. Getting a brew house there and installing it, at least in the location I have, would have been a nightmare, or at least costs a significant amount more. So for me, it's I guess I haven't really run the numbers or how you'd compare them necessarily, but it is a lot simpler to simply go to a friend's place, fill a tote, bring it back, as opposed to like even just figuring out whether the steam piping was installed correctly or whether the electrical actually doesn't work and you have to run something to the middle of the road, or the plumbing wasn't. So in that sense, I'm sure it was economical in the sense that all those problems that creep up or pop up and it turns into a $10,000 or $15,000 oopsie that just wasn't there before, at best. Avoiding all of that is great. Um, and Yeah, there's also, I mean, I don't know who's getting helped all that much. Like, it's kind of small things, but I think the DMV's like wort production capacity utilization, if we want to put like a bolded term, is probably something at like 5% right now. I think a lot of these, there's a lot of brew houses out there that could be run, 24/7 or three shifts, and I think most of them are not. So if that's helping anyone out, um, I'm hoping that works. And the other economic side that might be interesting is, there might be a lot of 10-barrel, brew pub or small brewers out there that really talented. They just don't have the space as their business model works, tasting room focused, to have like, you know, um, a 60 or 90 wine barrels just hanging out in the corner. So once I build up enough barrel stock, I think it would be fun and to kind of give back to other, brewers in the community, that they could roll by for their seasonal sour. They're going to do 10 BBLs or whatever, something like that. But they have 25 barrel, wine casks to pick from. So we could do like a custom blend. And they could really, feel the blending process out, when that's one of the beer styles they just can't really execute on their own system. So I don't know if that was a half answer or not, but
It was Jake's question, so we'll let
yeah.
Jake be the judge on that. I have a question from Mr. Stein. He wants to know, how long does it take your process from grain to glass? Because a lot of kettle sours can be cranked out in as little as 2 weeks. Are your beers more like a 2-year production time frame, especially with certain fruits, seasons, harvests, etc.? So grain to glass process
Y-
for like, just pick one of your beers.
Yeah. So right now we kind of have two rough categories of mixed culture saisons and barrel aged fruited sours. I've been so busy that a lot of these beers I wasn't waiting, like looking at them week to week to some, but both saisons we have right now are in red wine neutral barrels for about 9 months. My guess is like a very similar profile would have existed at 6 months. Uh, I don't have a hard rule of thumb, but everything that's going on fruit is usually about a year old.
Oh, wow.
Um, and I think a lot of the ways I've made beers previously, I think a lot of that maturity is really capping out at 2 years. where, maybe off flavors develop at that stage. Um, but the good parts kind of existed at year two. But every culture is different. I don't really have a standard house culture. Um, I, whether I mashed high or low, it's not that rigid. And I think part of the blending process is you build a system where you're not thinking about what can I flip next. So you should be checking periodically. I'm kind of anti oversampling just because it has too much headspace exposure. And then the one area that I'm curious about is sort of actual spontaneous beer because the traditional gooses or whatever, that's a 1, 2, and 3 year blend, and sometimes you have just like the 3-year-old lambic, and it's throwing like a ton of like compost and almost mushroom, like it's borderline, it's somewhat savory, kind of turns you off. But if you realize that's 10% of a blend, you see why that goose is what it is. And a lot of my 3-year spontaneous stuff definitely had some aged quality, but it didn't quite have that compost thing. Uh, which now that I know it exists, like I'd always want that in the back pocket, even if it's used sparingly.
Yeah. It's like cooking, like you're blending all these flavor profiles together. And I tried at least what, 7, 6, 7. And you had 2 saison ones. My favorite was that blueberry. Was it called Kerplunk or something?
Just don't call it KKK. That's the
Oh
one
my
rule.
God, why would I
Yeah,
do
it's
that?
from Blueberries for Sal. Yeah.
Oh God.
Well, it's kaplink, kaplink,
Oh, that's
kaplunk.
right. It's the
And it's a
children's
sound
book.
effect from a
It
children's book.
is. Yeah, I love that
And
book.
granted, I screwed up a fair amount, but a couple customers just couldn't get it out, so they just
Oh
abbreviated that
God.
way. And
Oh,
I thought a children's book was safe,
it
but
was clearly no, I didn't even think about
yeah.
that when I looked at it. You see where some people's brains go, I suppose.
Yeah.
I visited, like I said, I visited your tap room. It's really lovely and cozy and inviting. What were some of your biggest hurdles with opening Mieza?
Uh,
The biggest
I
hurdle.
could complain for um there's a lot of, I mean, everyone complains about permitting or all these other stuff. And being a small business owner, the first time I've done this or been involved in anything like it, like it is crazy. And everything that people say is correct. A couple surprising areas where it's not in the financial interest of the other party to not you know it doesn't help them, yet this problem occurs. So I'm used to other people maybe taking advantage of me or not, or negotiating or something like that. But the biggest surprise was just, who is this helping and why is it taking so
Uh
long?
yeah.
It took 5 months for my lease to get approved. So that's a lot of purgatory time when it's going to be a campaign, for the next year, just trying to get a place open. Um, what could have been an email, should have been a 30-minute phone call, and shouldn't have been 5 months. So,
That sounds like everybody's life.
um, so that's the biggest one. Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you decide on the blended fruits? Like, do you have to taste all of what has been aging? Like, but you said you're not a big fan of like sampling, and so how do you just know? Do you take very specific notes and then uh figure it out that way?
So I think I did like an MBAA presentation that bombed on this. But
Okay.
there's a great book by a woman called Bianca Bosker called Cork Dork, and she writes about her experience becoming a sommelier. But there's a really lot of fascinating stuff that basically says, like, you'll taste, and there's a different books I've been reading that kind of support this. Like, you taste better uh, when you start applying language. So tasting notes really shouldn't be for other people; they should be for you. And I was kind of a little bit behind on that. So much of what makes a good sour base beer blend or barrel, a lot of that really can't be done by now lab analysis, at least not time or cost effectively wise. If you gave me $80,000, whatever it is, for a GC mass spec, and it took me 3 hours to run a sample just to understand what the acid profile is between acetic and lactic, it's not going to be cost effective ever, despite how cool it would be. So you are relying on taste and you are relying on tasting notes. Um, but then when it comes to the blending session, I've sort of been arguing that if you try to write a full paragraph about every sample right in front of you, that's actually a really bad way to go about blending, because you're being too acclimatized to the sample, and uh, you know you get palate fatigue, all these things. So I'm trying to sort of been making this process of really, when you're in your tasting notes, they should be very directional, but you shouldn't. But you're really kind of going from your gut, and you're walking almost this tightrope. I think Dick Cantwell called it like a spirit quest. And so what I would argue, if you're ever in a blending session, just kind of say what worked and what didn't, whether a connection brought something you liked or didn't, and then as a post-mortem, fill out all the tasting notes as you remember them. And I'm also a strong advocate for always going back for a second blend, where regardless of how good that blending session was or how certain you were, uh, come back to it, pick your top 4 blends that you thought, uh, propose a counterfactual. So that's the type of timing and dedication that I'm trying to put into the process as a blendery that, honestly, a lot of production facilities, when the barrels are a passion project, they need to use the brew house space at the end of the day. And so the blends happening, the tasting notes are happening then. They're cleaning barrels all night, just to fit it in around the flagship products. So yeah, it's a lot of note taking. It's very hard to describe, and essentially, I'm hoping to make a program in the mid tier future where I can invite consumers to try mini blending sessions.
Oh, I love that. That sounds
So I'm looking
fun.
forward to that. Well, just like, I'll pull a couple like New Belgium did this a while back with, for like DC Beer Weeks, where you show up, they pull like 7 different, kegs off individual fooders. They have a glass of La Folie right in front of you, and you can kind of do your own blending thing. And it's super cool. A lot of home brewers and brewers don't have the ability to just have a lot of samples in front of them. And you don't taste it. When I give someone a glass of something, that's a finished product, and they don't get to see the journey.
Right.
And they might have had a better product for them, or just in general, and they don't get to feel that or experience that. But it is super important for the company and just the process. So being able to share that in the future, I'm very excited about.
I love that. I can tell that you're so extremely passionate about this. And from what I can tell so far in my one visit, your passion has really paid off, because everything I had was lovely. And all of my guests, I brought like 6 people in, and everyone was super happy with everything that you were putting out. So truly congratulations, especially being so young, like having your place, such few amount of months. I just want to say thank you, Alex, for coming on the show and chatting about your cool new spot. If you're looking for a new brewery to visit, especially if you're into wine-esque cider/mead invoking tasting sour beers, definitely check out Alex Lynch's Mieza. Alex, did we miss anything? When can folks visit? When you open?
Until the end of the fruiting season, grape season, probably will only be open on the weekends. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Our hours are posted into the fall, and then we'll kind of reassess some things. So that's the best time to visit.
Alex, where are you located?
We're located in the west end of Alexandria, so 109 Claremont Ave. It's right off the Holmes Run, Eisenhower Ave bike trail. It has its own Beltway exit, which is pretty cool. It's Beltway exit 174 off the Beltway. And then I think Van Dorn Metro and the 32 Dash is the best public transportation method.
It was really easy to get there. And I had a great time. Everyone had a great time. And so you get Brandy's seal of approval. So go check out Mieza. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love the podcast. It reminds me how many great spots I'm missing on a weekly basis.
We'll get out there.
Yeah, cheers.
Let's close us out. We are DC Beer across all the socials. Reach out, say hi, share pics of beer, be happy. We'll see you next time with our guest, the main man behind Snallygaster, Greg Ingert of NRG. Jordan, Matt, Richard, any closing thoughts, words of advice?
Yeah, definitely check out our website, dcbeer.com. Specifically our event section. You can always keep up with all the happenings around DC. And if you're ever looking for me or my main man, Splain, you can catch us at Other Half. Me specifically Wednesdays at 6:30 for Other Half, for Capital Trivia. And special shout out to Amber, maybe better known as Paunchy, but Shout out to Amber. She celebrated a birthday on Monday, so definitely hit her up on the socials to wish her a happy belated and buy her a pint, as this is her birthday month, as well as our good friend Jake and Stein. They're also celebrating birthdays this month as well. But in other news, tomorrow is the official Barrel and Flow Beer Fest in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Um, and our very own DC Beer Women's Brew Club representative, Amber, will be there representing for all of us. So shout out to Amber for that. And shout out to all the other folks that's going up for Barrel and Flow. That is the nation's largest Black beer festival. So if you aren't familiar, make yourself familiar because it's always a good time. And yeah, go ahead and block your calendars off for next August. I think it's always the second weekend. But yeah, cheers, guys. And again, shout out to Amber. Thank you.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you very soon. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
Cheers.